Hello everyone, it's a pleasure to have a paper accepted for the Learner Conference and to be able to present it to you virtually. My name is Alice Richardson. That's a picture of me there, and I am one of the 3 authors of this paper entitled Academic Learning Failure and Workload Strategies. What does it mean for universities? In this presentation, I will introduce the concept of academic learning failure and the 3 strategies that students could employ to overcome this failure. I will then explain the specific questions that our research addressed and the methods we used to address those questions. I will then present the results of the research, then discuss those results. Finally, I will return to the title of this talk and answer the part of the title that says, "What does it mean for universities?" So I'm going to start by defining academic learning failure. Typically, students at university enroll in 1 or more courses each semester. We defined learning failure to have occurred whenever a student failed at least one of the courses that they were enrolled in a given semester. This is pretty straightforward, I think, and would reflect typical understanding of a broad definition of failure that encompasses all sorts of outcomes, ranging from complete non-engagement to trying really hard at everything and still not quite making it to 50%. Next, I'm going to define workload strategies. These are the methods that arose from our research that we were able to identify that students are using in an attempt to overcome academic learning failure. We found 3 strategies that pretty much exhaust the possible approaches that a student could take in reaction to academic learning failure. We called these strategies the butterfly, the hasten, and the Pompeii, and the images on this slide are to help us remember what those strategies are as they come up through this talk. First, the butterfly strategy. We chose this name because the image of the butterfly is one of a creature that never rests anywhere for long, but flits from place to place. Students who use the butterfly approach follow academic learning failure with an approach where they enroll in only a small number of courses, which may even be less than a full-time load, or they enroll in only 1 semester rather than a whole year. They may even do both, enroll in just 1 semester with a reduced load. This way, they are minimizing their exposure to the learning community in the hope, we suppose, that they will concentrate their efforts in a smaller area of study. The second strategy for reacting to academic learning failure is the hasten strategy. The image here of the 2 white characters keeping up with the red character is supposed to capture the idea of people keeping up with a set standard. Students who use the hastening approach take on a standard full-time load across every semester, including summer or winter semesters where they are offered by their university. These students are therefore maintaining exposure to the learning community in the hope, we suppose, of building on their previous exposure and therefore passing a course at the second attempt. The third strategy that students may use is the Pompeii strategy. We chose this name and image because of the ideas they convey of something big, the mountain, that may explode at any time. Students taking the Pompeii route overcommit to workload. In other words, they enroll in more than a full-time load to the extent allowed by their university. These students maximize exposure to the learning community in the hope, we suppose, of not getting behind in their life schedule and succeeding somewhere, anywhere, whether that's in a course they've already failed once or in a new course. This is risky, as like the volcano, it could all end up exploding in students' faces, leaving them no better off than they were before. Our research questions therefore look at the outcome of these 3 strategies. We start with the butterflies and hypothesize that students who experience failure in semester 1 are less likely to experience failure in semester 2 if they reduce their workload. In other words, there's a concept of capacity for learning within students, and if they enroll in fewer courses, then that capacity is concentrated and we expect that they will pass more of them. Our second hypothesis deals with the hasteners and hypothesizes that students who experience failure in semester 1 are just as likely to experience failure in semester 2 if they hold steady their workload. Once again, there's a concept of capacity for learning within students, and if they enroll in the same number of courses, then that capacity is spread across the same number of courses, and we expect that they will pass about the same number of them. Finally, Our third hypothesis deals with the Pompeiists and hypothesizes that those who experience failure in semester 1 are more likely to experience failure in semester 2 if they increase their workload. As before, there's a concept of capacity for learning within students, and if they enroll in more courses, then that capacity is spread more thinly, and we expect they will pass fewer of them. Our research questions lent themselves to a quantitative case study involving population data from one university. The university we studied was an Australian regional teaching university with approximately 10,000 students, which makes it small to medium-sized in the Australian context. Our data consists of the course results of these 10,000 or so students in 2008, semester 1 and semester 2. 1,248 students failed at least one unit in semester 1, and they form the basis of our data collection in semester 2. For semester 2, we recorded the number of courses taken by each of those 1,248 students and their results for semester 2, in particular, whether they failed at least one unit or passed everything. At this point, I'd like to introduce a new concept, that of the GLA. It's related to the well-known GPA or grade point average, but can belong to a student or to a unit. In this talk, it will be used to describe student achievement a bit like the GPA, but Bryant has shown that it is a valid measure of learning in a course or unit as well. To calculate a GLA, you allocate a score of 4 to each high distinction grade, a score of 3 to each distinction, a score of 2 to each credit, and a score of 1 to each pass. Fail grades score 0. The scores are then averaged to come up with the GLA. We'll now use the GLA to study the outcomes of the three strategies, butterfly, hastener, and Pompeii. You can see on this slide that some butterflies, 155 out of 430, not only failed at least one unit in semester 2, but their GLA got worse as well. But on the whole, butterflies were less likely to experience academic learning failure the second time compared to the first, with a clear 53% of butterflies passing everything and improving their GLA. Sylvia's story, that you can read on this slide, is the most likely one that we saw play out for butterflies, supporting our hypothesis that students who experience failure in semester 1 are less likely to experience failure in semester 2 if they reduce their workload. You can see on this slide that some hasteners, 169 out of 623, not only failed at least one course in semester 2, but their GLA got worse as well. But on the whole, hasteners were actually not just as likely to experience failure in semester 2. In fact, they were less likely to. Indeed, a clear 55% of hasteners passed everything in semester 2 and improved their GLA. Bradley's story, that you can read on this slide, is the most likely one that we saw play out for hasteners. Not quite what we hypothesized, which was that students who experience failure in semester 1 are just as likely to experience failure in semester 2 if they hold steady their workload. In fact, it was a better outcome than we had hoped for. Finally, you can see on this slide that a small number of Pompeiists, just 37 out of 205, not only failed at least one unit in semester 2, but their GLA got worse as well. But on the whole, Pompeiists were actually not more likely to experience failure in semester 2. In fact, they were less likely to. Indeed, a clear 70% of Pompeiists passed everything in semester 2 and improved their GLA. Me's story on this slide is the most likely one that we saw play out for Pompeiists. Again, not what we hypothesized, which was that those who experience failure in semester 1 are more likely to experience failure in semester 2 if they increase their workload, but in fact a better outcome for students. So now that we have met three students who each pursued a different strategy in the face of academic learning failure, let's have a look in a bit more detail at the GLA of the 1,248 students who experienced academic learning failure in semester 1, 2008. This table contains mixed outcomes. Firstly, we see that more students fail than fail, in other words, experience academic learning failure 2 semesters in a row, rather than just once. There's 718 who do that, compared to 540 out of 1,248. On the other hand, more students improve their GLA, whatever the outcome in the second semester, than not, with 710 managing to improve their GLA compared to 548 out of 1,248. Finally, we see a small minority, 25 out of 1,248, passing everything in semester 2, but not increasing their GLA in doing so. This brings us to Valentino, whose story on this slide is an example of one of those 25 students who passed everything but did not increase their GLA in doing so. He seems pretty disappointed by this apparently successful outcome, and we can put this disappointment into the context of at least one of the following dot points about what it means for universities. The individual names and texts of the stories that you have just seen are fictional, but the data on their results and eventual departure from university, whether by withdrawing or graduating, they're all real. They show us that students who feel they have grade capacity, like Valentino, can be successful Pompeiists. That is, they can over-enroll and still pull successful semesters out of the bag. We'd like to encourage student advisors to think carefully about the results of the different workload strategies presented here and where each of their students fits in. There's also some further research that could go into students such as Bradley, who seem to do all right, but then inexplicably withdraw from university. Which brings me to my second to last slide, which points to some other areas for future research. The paper that goes with this talk raises the possibility of 2 other strategies beyond Butterfly, Hasten, and Pompeii. Some students, like Sylvia and Bradley, choose to withdraw from university entirely after exposure to academic learning failure. On the other hand, we are aware at some universities that students who change degree begin with a clean slate. That is, their count of courses failed is reset to 0. This means that, for example, if the university has a rule that you are barred from enrolling in a course that you failed 3 times, this count is reset to 0 if you change degrees, even if the same course is required for the new degree as for the old one. So switching degrees could help a student stay in the learning community, and this is the case at least at the university we study. Therefore, we hypothesize that students who experience failure in semesters 1 and 2 are more likely to switch degrees or withdraw than successful students. Secondly, we hypothesize that students who experience failure in semester 1, followed by passing in semester 2, are less likely to switch degrees or withdraw compared to failing students. These questions will be followed up elsewhere. As a postscript to this talk, I'm delighted to announce that between the submission of the paper and the preparation of this talk, Dennis Bryant's PhD thesis has been examined, and Dennis received his doctorate in April 2013. On that note of complete academic learning success, I'd like to thank you very much for listening to this presentation, and I'll now return you to the session chair.